the jacket down. That moment. That moment that it all changed. The moment that you forgot to wake up.
David, we have all changed. Me, your brother, it's you that's the same. You had to do a lot of growing up quick. But you got a chance here to see that the world has changed.
Can't go back. You can't ever do it over.
Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today we have a real treat as we're talking to the talented cast and creatives who are part of the OWN series, David Makes Man. I'm going to kick things off by introducing our facilitator, Katia Woods, who is celebrating her birthday today in Philadelphia, Kim Singleton in New York, Albert McGee, who's also in South Florida with Mr. Tarell, Carolyn Hines in Toronto, Rhonda Rasha Penrice in Atlanta, and Caron Linois in Virginia, in Charlottesville, Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. I'm gonna let you guys do what you do so well, and I will see you on the other side.
Hello, everyone. Kim Singleton, considered Black lit television show out of New York City. And this first question is for Kwame. The character of David seems to have the same coping mechanisms as he had when he was younger. He tends to retreat into himself, and he has these visions of people who are not there. It was even stated in one of the episodes that David doesn't move on, but everybody else has moved on. Give us your perspective on why the David character can't seem to move on emotionally like everyone else has. And they've all had different types of trauma in their life.
I think that the David character, like most men, we struggle with, being vulnerable. I think we struggle with expressing our emotions. And I feel like David, he's trying to figure out how to express his emotions in the right way, but he doesn't know how to. So in trying to do that, he's creating all this chaos. And he's creating all this chaos so that he has something to fix. It's like, so he needs chaos to happen around him in order for him to feel like he's needed, or feel a part of something. And so I just think that like he's, and then at that point, he's looking to his younger self to kind to like pull him up out of these situations. It's like, I've created all this chaos and now you fix it, figure it out. What do we do? And I just think, and I think we do that a lot, just as in general,
Thank you. It's so many layers, and you're doing a great job along with everyone else. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. You're welcome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Katia with Cup of Social. Akili, my question is for you. What do you want young men to take away when they see you? Because a lot of young men have a similar story, and why we sometimes focus so much on the struggle, we don't focus on the journey, the growth, and surviving and overcoming. So what would your message to be to other young men that are in similar positions as David?
Well, in season 1, David Young is still identifying himself and finding himself as a man, as well as trying to establish himself as the man of the house. So that will carry out throughout season 2 and throughout older David. But what I want from young men to take from this is honestly to learn that it's okay to, refer to people and refer to people like the character like Miss Elijah's in our neighborhood. And we have those type of characters in our neighborhood. And it's okay to go to them whenever we feel insecure or, need encouragement.
Absolutely. Outstanding performance.
Thank you.
To see where you go this season.
I truly appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Al McGee with YETicket.com. And I want to say David Makes Man is a great show. My question is to you, Kwame and Akili, and also to Dee Harris. I looked at myself as a young man as I'm watching this show. It's a little bit different from my life and watching this show. Now, young men have to make their own decisions no matter what or where they at, who they talk to or who they don't talk to. So Akili, first question to you is, as young David, you seem to depend on a lot of people to help you make the right decisions. And then adult David, Kwame, you seem now to depend on yourself, and Dee Harris as the showrunner and the producer. How did you come up with these ideas?
Well, honestly, young David still, like you said, he started going to therapy in season 1, and that's very important. And we get to see that and showcase that in season 1, and that carries out throughout season 2. You know what I'm saying? And that's one thing we want to stress throughout season 2 is the importance of therapy, because there sometimes can be a knack that something's wrong with therapy and there isn't. You know what I'm saying? And if you need therapy, it's okay to say you need therapy and to go to therapy. You know what I'm saying? And David, like you said, young David sometimes takes all these problems upon himself and makes it worse. And some of that will continue to show out throughout season 2. You know what I'm saying? But that's sometimes, I feel like that's kind of what we like about David. It gets him in trouble sometimes, and sometimes he saves the world. So we'll just have to watch season 2 and see how it turns out.
Yeah, as the older David, you still had to figure out your ideas yourself. And, you know, I know there's writers and things like that. So how you feel about that, the decisions that they made in the script for you to overcome whatever obstacles that you had to jump over?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was, one is being able to watch what Akili had already established in the first season and being able to bring some of those nuances from younger David to older David. And then also just tapping into things from my life, family members who have dealt with mental health, me, myself, who, struggles with being vulnerable, and expressing my feelings, not really wanting to talk to you about my feelings, keeping a lot of things, held in, and just but the beautiful thing about the writing and the creativity of the show and what Tarell does is that, like, me, myself, and not the character, but me, myself, being working on this character helped me break down a lot of walls within myself, and I think, like, from working on the show, I grew a whole lot, not just as an actor, but as a man.
Hello, and I wanted to thank you all for being here this morning as well. We are so excited to present David Makes Man as the showrunner of the show. My, job was to basically, assist Tarell in putting his vision out there for, from the first and the second season, and to make sure that the trains kept running with everything, especially in light of the pandemic this past season. And in doing that, presenting a whole nother cast into the cast that we had previously, playing the older versions of them themselves. So while they could not be in a space where we had them in the first season, so there were a lot of things to jump over and make sure happen. And what was beautiful about it is everybody was on the same page of the show going forward, and we were able to get through 10 episodes and produce them with, I'm still knocking on wood, y'all, knocking on, to get, 10 episodes in the can, and we did that. And I think I answered your question, Albert. Was there another part, the second part?
Oh, that was very good. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
The show is great. And like I say, as a young man, myself, looking at this, talking about my old self, my young self, a lot of things in there I never did know about as a young man. So I want to thank you for bringing that out. And I hope a lot of young men watch this.
I do too. Thank you.
Hello. This is Karan from Karanism.com. David Makes Man does complex relationships so well, the interpersonal relationships, and it beautifully engages the imagination for the characters and their relationships with themselves. So my question to Akili and to Kwame is, how has David coming of age in season 2 inspired your imagination?
Well, David's coming to age in season 2 really transfers from season 1, because, you know, in season 1, he was trying to identify himself as a man and working through these challenging environments like school and the Ville, and, you know, just finding himself and finding how to fit in, adapting to every scenario, each environment like a chameleon, so and that will travel throughout season 2. So it's gonna be fun to see that. I don't want to really reveal too much, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, it's just gonna be exciting.
I'll say definitely working on this show brought out the kid in me again, you know. So like me and Akili, like we were like big kids on set. When you're saying, when we be on set, we be clowning and having fun. So like, you know, just being in that environment, you know, it brought out the, you know, the silliness. It brought out, like you say, the imagination and just wanting to feel like a kid again. You know, it's like, okay, I can just be free. You know, I don't have to be an adult all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm out here, I'm over here with the youngsters. I'm just gonna have fun. We over there, they teaching me dances. We doing TikToks. So, you know, it was really fun. I enjoyed it. It definitely brought out the, like I say, that imaginary and that kid side of me again.
Show us some of the dances.
I don't know them right now.
Hey man, they're gonna have to wait till the episodes, man. It was fun. That was fun, man.
But thank you so much for that. It really does inspire the imagination and causes us to look at ourselves differently. It engages our humanity, our full humanity. So thank you so much for these brilliant performances. I'm really loving it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Carolyn. First, here's what happened, and Carolyn talks. First of all, thank you so much for being on this panel with us. I think this show is very, I think, important because it talks about mental health from the perspective of not only grown adults, but also from children. And this is for Tarell, Akili, Kwame, and Dee, everyone. It has to do with the concept of noise, because I've noticed in the show that there's a visual language of noise, and then there's auditory noise. So like we see that for David, he processes noise differently to other people. Like he either drowns it out, or he just like focuses on it. Because there's a scene in season 1 between Marissa, David, and Saren that I thought kind of reflects his whole thought process, where the two of Saren and David are having a conversation, and Marissa's just background noise. And I realized that's kind of a trend throughout the whole series and going into season 2. And then I noticed that for David, his home is devoid of like visual noise. Everything is gray. It's like flat, and it's like he's trying to like drown out the noise and ignore like all of the noise in his head. So can you tell me, Tarell, as a writer, like developing that language for him as a character, and for Kwame and Akili playing David as someone who has such complex thought processes and is trying to adapt to the situations that he's in with regards to noise, and for Dee, like creating this visual space for him. Like I think his apartment is so interesting because it doesn't suit the person that he seems to be or who he used to be as a child.
First of all, thank you so much. And you know, everybody who knows me knows I'm really geek, because I'm like, oh my God, she gets it. She understands. Bless you. Thank you. Like you don't know how hard it is. Sometimes you'd be like, I try to be intentional about these things. So yes, there's intentionality around that. When we first pitched this show to Miss Winfrey, we talked very deeply about you know, how young people metabolize and synthesize childhood trauma. And if you remember, and I'm not spoiling anything, but for those of you who haven't seen season 1, you should see it. And David suffers a tragedy in his life, and it's pretty loud and shocking. And the way in which he metabolizes everything after that is what he hears. He heard a shot, right? That's how the trauma entered him into his psyche. He heard it first, right? And so anytime a person has an experience like that, however it affects them, that's how their bodies will try to fortify a survival mechanism for it, right? If you see it, your ability to see and what you see can be triggering. So you're vigilant about what's in your space. If there's a trauma that you heard that kept happening and keeps playing over and over in your head, you want to mute down any of that in your space so that you can be aware, so you can stay ready, like Sky tells him to be, right? So he's trying to stay ready by keeping distractions low, even what he wears. And we had a great, designers from our production designer, Mark, and to our costume designer, Fernando Rodriguez. We talked about like what David needs to present, like he has got, like you said, everything together, but also how to make it so that it's easy and palatable, so it doesn't disrupt his ability to focus, right? He doesn't wear, you won't see David in any crazy colors, for example. When you go into his house, you don't see like, a pink chair anywhere, right? And that's because he's trying to keep as much of that as calm as possible. You don't see a crazy speaker system. You don't ever hear him playing the radio, right? And so I'm glad you picked up on those things, and that means you're the audience that we want. So you keep coming back and bringing us more insight.
I was just gonna say, Tarell put it so perfectly. I don't even know what else to say. But yeah, I honestly do think the soundtrack does add to everything as well. It's honestly a team effort, and like you said, from the clothes to the soundtrack, everything honestly just helps me embody the character too, so I can put on my best performance as well as the words on the page. Thank you, Tarell, and the whole writers room.
For me, like Akili said, and Tarell said it perfectly. Yeah, I went to them whenever I needed, help with understanding, where David needed to be at, like you say, with him quieting the noise, or, his mental capacity, Tarell, Kyle, Erica, they will always help me. Lucian, would help me through those moments when there were moments where I struggled and I couldn't figure out, where he's supposed to be at, at this moment, or how do I get him there? And all of them do such a great job of breaking it down for you so simply, the same way Tarell just explained it. Like he did that so simply, it makes you say, I get that. Wow, it's that light bulb moment pops up. You're like, oh, okay, because you be almost like David as an actor. Sometimes we're making stuff so much more difficult. We create these problems, and then Tarell comes in and be like, oh, if you just that right there, you're like, oh, okay, all right, I got you. All right, we cool, and then we in there. So yeah.
That was a great explanation, Kwame, of it. And you're right. Everything is very intentional, and from the production design to the dress, the sound design was extremely important. Sometimes even more so than the visual, because of the fact that everything is in David's head, his imagination, everything is playing out. So even though those moments of, especially in older David, there's a lot of stuff going on in his head. And so we processed that, and we were figuring out the language of trying to make sure we, the audience got that as well. So a lot of the, editing was very important. We even had nicknames and shorthand for words we would use for different sounds, from the ringing sound, that is what happens in David's head, because it's so important at different times. So our mix sessions are epic. We just had one because of the fact everything has to be right. And it just so happens that Tarell and I were both on the same page with that, because I'm also very sensitive to sounds. And growing up in neighborhoods, those that did is like, because I was always watching with a third eye, listening with a third ear of anything that was going to come at me. So I was, I stayed ready. So I'm very sensitive to those. And that's what happens to David, in a way that when he gets to become older David, he's still processing in that way, even though he doesn't have to.
Yeah, there was a phrase I was trying to remember, and it's sensory deprivation. His apartment reminds me of a sensory deprivation chamber. It's just one big room that he removes all like visual noise. So I think it's amazing the way you guys translate everything into like specific things with his behavior and the way he processes his trauma. So great show, fantastic acting for both Kwame and Akili, and thank you for this story, Tarell.
Hi, Nancy Green with Film Critique. And I wanted to know a little bit more about the visuals in terms of his imagination and things like the writing, and how you went about bringing that together, and what the process is like to try to visualize that on set while everything is going on.
The first season, we were lucky to have a director, Michael Francis Williams, who in the very beginning, and Tarell brought him in, because we knew it was, when you read Tarell's pilot and his words, they leapt off the page. I read it twice, and you know, every time I read it, there was something new, because he writes visually. I often tell him he needs to be a director, and I'm going to make him direct something. But it's the way he processes, and it was important to get these tiny things visually on the screen, and when you don't have a huge budget. So we had to be very, very creative in those terms, and Michael understood that, and he came in with a reel that blew us away. But he hadn't directed anything, you know, as far as an hour long. He does short films and commercials, etc. So it was bringing the studio and network on board with us of what we saw, and we were so passionate about what he could give us that it totally won them over. And then it was like, when you get to, you know, like you said, on set, then that presents, you know, other problems, like, okay, how are we going to get, you know, David being a lookout, you know, for, you know, upstairs, and he's doing homework, and then his mind wanders. How do we reflect that? Music is also very important in our show. And so that also, you know, helps in bringing in David's imagination. And in images that we took, especially Tarell, who had specific, ideas, was like, okay, how do we take from the elders, the ancestors, that lends itself to what's going on today, and interpret, David's imagination and what he's doing that makes him lost, and you get lost with him, and then suddenly the reality of the reality of the veil permeates it, and what does that look like? Again, the sound comes into it, the whooshing of in and out of things. So Michael helped us in that visual language, and David's imagination. And then there were practical things, like in the first season, when things that David wants to say, and it also comes into the second season even more so, where it's just a camera angle where you go, okay, he's saying one thing, and then you kind of like go over here, and suddenly he's in that same position, and you're like, oh, he was just imagining that this is what I want to say, but I don't know how to get there. And so the audience is like, come on, David, you can get there. And that was part of it as well.
I mean, it's always interesting. You get a bunch of people who together who enjoy the creative process, and say to them, hey, have you ever thought about what a 13-year-old Black kid might imagine? And let them go. Man, the writer's room was amazing. You know what I mean? Like the writers, we had a writer's room that was full of amazing people who were ready to find all the interesting things, be it, a new edition, a daydream, to a moment where a water fight becomes an epic battle in the middle of the projects, to, bioluminescent smiles. I would love to be like, yeah, I did all of that, but I did not. I did not. I had a crew of very imaginative people who were able to take what we think of as quotidian moments, these sort of very regular moments of our lives, and turn them into all the things that we wish they could be sometimes. And sometimes as simple as a mother's hug. Sometimes as simple as a friend's goodbye. Sometimes it's as easy as asking someone out to a date or a dance. Can turn into all kinds of wonderful, amazing things. So that was exciting for a lot of people. And so you just kind of have to go around and see who's game for that. And some people are just not. Some people want to, show cars blowing up and, drug cartels fighting across the border. And that's cool too. I'll watch that. But for our show, it was like, yo, you want to see what people imagine in their most, intimate, quiet moments, and Allison, Jaquin, Lucian, Dee, John, Kristen, Bawafua, all of them were ready. They were all ready for it.
And that was intentional. I mean, what I told Tarell was, when we first started getting a writing staff together, the different elements of the script and what I wanted. I'm always big in casting a writer's room, not just, hiring people. And it was, I remember when Allison came in, one of the writers, and when she left, because I was like, she's going to ask the right questions, and how she, would interpret things, and exactly that. So it was, constantly, upping ourselves, like, oh, can we do that? Can we accomplish that? So that was awesome and giving the writers the time, because a lot of time TV is like boom, boom, once that train starts running. But in trying to create a schedule that gave writers room and time to imagine and create what they wanted, we could always pare back, but to, let them roll with it, gave us a lot of that creativity as well.
Hey, it's Rhonda. People are talking about the kind of escapism of it, but for me, the second season is so grounded in reality. And Tarell, I wanted to ask you about creating this space where people grapple with being extracted from their communities and then finding their way in again, like creating that like fine line between functioning in this world and functioning in this other world, and they don't always connect.
That's a really great point. And I think Akili, sort of began to answer that, not sort of, he began to answer that earlier on, talking about, David in first season and the seeds that are planted in young David. I mean, young David learns, as you said so astutely, to navigate these quote unquote two worlds, right? This world that is pressuring him to go outside of his community to excel, and this one world that is, his community and trying to get him to do what his community does to excel, right? And I think, so he, on the one hand, he's going to this gifted program that's going, hey, if you get ready, you can go to this elite school that is not in your neighborhood, that is over there, right? And that is different than where you come from. They won't value the things that are like you. Deion Sanders was saying this the other day on a show called I Am Athlete, talking about HBCs and HBUs, what they offer our students in a way that that privileged white institutions do not, right? And one of those things is knowing where you come from and what you value a little bit more intimately. Not exactly, because we're not a monolith, but like just having some similar language. And David is taught pretty early on that, like, hey, you need to get out of where you are in order to survive this world you want to get in. So we find him as an adult kind of doing that, kind of not living in the neighborhood, working for people who have interests differently than his neighborhood does. And is there any way to balance that back? Is there any way that David can find common ground again with people from his neighborhood and from where he lives? It's a huge question that I have for myself, because I live, not far from Liberty City where I grew up. And yet I know that because of where I've gone, I appear to be and feel like I'm no longer a part of that neighborhood. I'm not in an intimate relationship with that neighborhood. I still have deep love for it. I still, do everything I can to uplift it. But I'm not exactly a part of that. And how do we make space and community for those who quote unquote went away? When do we start teaching our young people that they don't have to go anywhere, that they're valued for what they can do in our community? South Florida specifically has such a brain drain in the Black community. And so, because we tell all of our talented folk that you got to go to New York to become a ballet dancer, you got to go to Paris to become a painter, you got to go to New Orleans or to Chicago to become a jazz singer and a player or a musician or a football player, you got to go to San Francisco or somewhere outside of here. And how do we turn the narrative to go, you can go, but you'll always be a part of this place, right? You're always connected. How do we do that? So the show is talking about that. And it doesn't give answers, but it does ask some really cool questions. And we see David struggling with the answer.
And I should ask, with Kwame, having been on The Wire, Snowfall, and shows like that, what is it like for you to play this other side? The introspective, the person who is coming to terms with all that Tarell has described.
I mean, in the beginning, it was a lot of nerves. Me and Tarell had a conversation on the phone before I even started. And I was like, I've never done anything like this before, and I was like, I'm nervous, and he was like, brother, we got you, and once he said that, I knew that, they weren't gonna let me fail. And so that gave me the confidence to come in and just, be able to give my all to this character, because I knew that I had Tarell, I knew I had Dee, I knew I had Akili, I knew I had Alana, I knew I had everybody, at my disposal to help me navigate through this character that was so different than anything I'd ever played before. Because playing drug dealers and gangsters and stuff, I grew up in that environment. I grew up in that neighborhood. That was easy, being a vulnerable Black man, expressing your feelings, that's hard in everyday life. So now I'm trying to do this on TV, and then I want people to believe that I'm actually doing it, so it's like when I struggle with it in real life. So it was, it was definitely a challenge, but it was a welcoming challenge, so I was excited, so they say excitement and nervousness is the same emotion. So, it was good.
Well, thank you guys. And Tarell, you're like amazing. Love Choir Boy and everything.
Thanks so much. That's kind of you.
Hi, I'm going to throw this question to Dee and Tarell. One of my favorite characters, of course, after Achilles and Kwame's character, is Gloria the Mom. Even though she was an addict, she was able to raise two young boys, really, in my opinion, to be successful. One is a corporate executive, I would say. One's a police officer sworn to protect and serve. And to me, that represents the strength and resilience of Black women, the things we do every day. My question to you guys is, tell me what messaging do you want your audience to walk away with about Black women? Dee, you can start.
That's a great question. And you said it, Kim, resiliency and strength. A lot of times, the strong Black woman, that's the constant. But the problem with being a strong Black woman is at some point you're going to let go and fall, and is somebody going to be there to catch you. And a lot of times you got to catch yourself. It was also important for us to show as a single Black mother that from first season to second season, with the first season being doing away with the myth that just because there were single Black mothers doesn't mean they're not present. Even though Gloria struggled, she still trying to make sure it's like, okay, you have food in the fridge. I want you to walk your brother home. There were a lot of things put on David, but she still was present, even though she had her own struggles. Going to second season, you see that it was also important for her because of her kids, and seeing that David worked so hard to get into this gifted school, that it was like, if my son, who I put all this stuff on, can do that, I can at least, get it up for myself and do this for the, JG. And then in turn, make sure that young kids, trans, et cetera, that they also have people, as she will say later on. And she becomes the ultra mother, which, then that's its own thing with David. So it was to show all these different facets of a Black woman and a Black, mother, and a Black woman with a partner, and how they also interact. A lot of times that happen in neighborhoods where, a woman is married, and then after divorce or not in a relationship, and then suddenly you go, there's two aunts. You were like, there are two aunts that are living together, and that was something was like, oh, they're in a loving relationship. But showing that in such a grounded way, that this is normal. Especially in the first season, a lot of it was taken from my sister was a single mother, and though it takes a village, we all, surrounded her and my nephew with love and raising up, and then there's that, a Black man. There's a lot put on Black women that's not hardly at all put out there and shown, and I think that was important for us going from first to second season.
There's not a lot to add, except that, I love the character of Gloria too. And she, nothing like watching a person who everybody is in some way thinking in the back of their head, oh, they gonna mess up. Go, I know you think I'm gonna mess up, I'm gonna show you better. Everybody loves that story. And I love to see Gloria, even in the first season where she does have her obstacles, she has those things in her way. I love to see that, it's interesting that few people connect David's resiliency and his imaginative genius, but they don't connect it to Gloria. And one of the things that was important to me and Dee was like, no, you can see it. It's a one-to-one comparison. She be at work imagining and thinking things are different. He be at school imagining and thinking things are different. They both live they live their lives in a very similar way. And thank God that David has that kind of role model in his life, flawed and all.
So my last question is for Tarell, and it has to do with the analogy of games. So it seems that David is always constantly playing a game, whether it's on the block, learning to survive on the block, is learning to live at home with his mother and his brother, and then as an adult, he's learning to survive the game of corporate world and surviving as a Black man. So could you just tell me about building that analogy into David's character, to his relationships with the people around him, and will there come a time where he won't have to play the game anymore?
It's a good question. I don't know, but it definitely comes from my own life. You will even see me when there's things I don't want to. Oh, how can I make a game of this? Right? Like I'll go, how do I make a game? How do I make this into a puzzle? Because human beings naturally like solving puzzles. We like solving mysteries. We like figuring things out. We're curious. We don't like to just work. Like it's a myth that Black people are lazy. All people are lazy. People don't like to work. People like to find things out. People like to discover. People will do a whole bunch of things if it's like fulfilling in a curiosity way. That's just who, people are. And I think Black people specifically love to invent things. We love a game. We love a story. We love we love the complexity of music, for example. Like, so we couldn't just have classical notes follow each other in a 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. We had to 1, 2, 3 to 2, 2, 2, 3 to 3, 3. We had to complicate and syncopate the rhythm, right? Because that's fun, that's interesting. How can I make this even more interesting to myself? And so I do that in my life all the time. Sometimes that's creating chaos. Sometimes I'm making more work for myself and more noise for myself and the world around me than I need to. And I'm old enough now. And when I say old enough, I mean by after years of being not old enough, I finally got to 40 and was like, oh, I can actually be like, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm just not gonna do anything, right? Instead of being like, I'm gonna make this more complicated. And I think that's, I definitely think David's not there yet. But he believes that, making things more complicated and more chaotic is actually the way forward. And a lot of us do that, right? A lot of us make more mess in order for our brains to stay stimulated, because then we'll want to get through it, right? And that's a survival technique, and that's okay. It's okay to do that sometimes. When do you learn to put that down, right? And some of my messes have been really successful. Like, I make a mess and people are like, that's a beautiful mess. We love that mess. We want to see that mess. Well, God help you if they start rewarding your mess, because then you want to do it all the time for real, right? Like, you gonna give me praise for being imaginative. And so you have to, as human beings, we have to, often say to ourselves, when do I need rest? When do I need to not do, when I need to be still and know, right? And I think, and David is not there yet, but we do have fun watching him make his messes though. And I think that's the difference between second season and first season. First season, some of the messes he got into, he certainly didn't make up on his own. He may have made them worse, but he was trying to get through them. And poor kid finally figured out some ways of doing some stuff and got through it, and thank goodness. And I think in second season, we see a person still thinking that they're on the battlefield when they are not. And that, and I think there's a lot more joy and humor in seeing that, because we know the stakes are high, but they're not as life or death as they were in all cases. There are some cases where things get pretty tenuous in season 2.
Okay, thank you so much.
Akili, Kwame, Dee, and Tarell, thank you so much for joining us today. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black critics, thank you for watching this edition of AAFCA Roundtables. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. You were terrific.